Cool beans! Welcome back to the Movie World Marathon. I'm
Hello,
Andrew,
I'm Mac.
and we're on a brand spanking new marathon, another big one. And I think we're
Woo!
both very excited about it.
I'm mildly excited. I will say I'm not like overly thrilled.
Not overly thrilled. I thought you were excited about this one.
Okay, rephrase. I'm glad I'm finally getting it off my to watch list. Um, I'm a huge fan of sci-fi, less of a fan of horror, and I get the sense that these fall
Ah,
more under like the thriller horror
a
genre than anything else,
little, a
using
little.
sci-fi as a vehicle.
Ah.
Um, and like, I don't know, it's fine. I don't know, like haunted houses and scary movies don't entertain me.
Well, there are
So
no haunted houses, so that's good.
I'm
But
just trying to communicate. For some reason, like people get this urge to go to all these things, and
mhm.
I just, I don't, I try them. I go all
I
the
see.
time.
I think for the
It
most
just doesn't
part, you'll
excite me.
find as we move through this series, it's almost, if not typically, intellectual horror. But yes, we're on the Alien franchise. We're gonna do the Aliens, and
Woo!
just to clarify, starting off, we're only doing the Aliens, including like the
Mhm.
Prometheus prequels. But we're not doing Alien versus Predator, and we're not doing the Predators. Maybe one day, but not this
Maybe one
time.
day.
Just the aliens and
Mhm.
in release order. None of this which one came out first in the
Right.
timeline mumbo jumbo. Not worrying about
This
that.
is one that almost have to, like, you'd almost have to do it in release order because it really
Yeah.
wouldn't make sense to try and go chronologically in the
Not really.
timeline.
Yeah. I mean, you probably could, but like, who cares?
Hmm.
Yeah, we're on the first Alien, directed by Ridley Scott. Came out June 22nd, 1979. You know it. Most love it. It's a classic. We're here. I'm excited. But at the
Hmm.
same time,
Hmm.
this is one of those ones again. It's a classic. It's pretty solid. So I don't have like a great deal to say. It's just 'cause, like you can only talk about the good stuff for so long. Like, it's just so much more fun and easy to talk about when there's like obvious flaws. So since this was your first time watching it ever, I'm more intrigued to hear what you have to say.
Um, I don't know. Like I said, this is maybe not my genre. I thought it was all right. I wasn't ever heavily invested in most of the characters, possibly because I knew they were all gonna die already. But
Mm-hmm.
you kind of enter most horror films knowing that anyway. Um, and I don't know. I wasn't crazy about this is such a weird thing to complain about, but I wasn't crazy about the sound mixing. There were some cool sound design choices that I liked, but then there were just some things like I wasn't able to understand all the dialogue very well.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of ambient noise sometimes, and the soundtrack kind of sucked. Like there were moments where they really needed some good tension in the audio and it just wasn't there. Um so that's a weird thing to start on, but that was my main takeaway actually after finishing the film.
Interesting place to start. Though I will say real quick on that note, I can see on the screen here my audio is picking up my dog chewing on her cheese bone. So I apologize for that. She is crunching away. She's halfway across the room, and it's picking that up. So I am sorry about that. But no, I mean I kind of get it, but I don't fully disagree. I'm sorry, I don't fully
Mhm,
agree. There are some
mhm,
sound effect things that aren't my favorite. I chalk it up to it not yet being the 80s. And
right.
like the one that comes to mind right away for me is the sound that the xenomorph makes right after it bursts out of Kane's chest. It just feels a little
Mhm,
too artificial and robotic. But again, I don't
mhm,
find that as an immediate issue. I understand where you're coming from. However, I did make a mental note. I think the lack of a soundtrack in many places actually helps build the tension because it feels more real. And the use of the heartbeat instead of a soundtrack in so many places, that this time around, especially for some reason, because I'm watching it and I'm paying attention, I'm in the dark by myself, it was fucking with me. I was more spooked, and I know
mhm.
exactly what happened. So like I shouldn't have been, but I was a little bit. Um,
I
I just
mean, I guess the heartbeat definitely was cool. I actually did make a note of that. I liked the sort of use of that in a couple of different ways, even like the heavy breathing, like when the they call it the face hugger, right? Is off
Yes.
of
Yes.
Kane, and they're all in the room looking for it. There's like, I'm pretty sure it's Kane is heavy breathing in
Mm.
that scene, and that has a little bit of tension to it. But there were moments. I am not a person to like pick at special effects, but to me, like the emotional moment will carry you through an area of disbelief sometimes. And there were a couple of moments where I was like, that just looks like a puppet, a cool puppet, but a puppet. And if there had been some music or something else going on in that moment, I would have been able to latch onto that and carry it through, like, the moments that were just slightly unbelievable, I guess. Um, I don't know, I'm starting out pretty critical. I don't mean to. There's a lot that I found interesting about this, even, like, the small plot they kind of wove through it. Like, there were a couple of things at the beginning I was like, "This feels like a really, like, kind of Deus Ex Machina setup." They're a shipping like they're a semi truck essentially. They're not going to be charting new lanes. So why wouldn't have anybody
I
heard this audio before?
Yeah. I want to come back
And
to that.
it being
I
a
do
conspiracy
Yeah, I do want to come
made me
back to
feel
that.
better about
Yeah.
it.
So we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
I think this is your Terminator because this is kind of where I
Okay.
was coming from when we did Terminator because
Hmm.
both Terminator and this movie are absolute pillars in sci-fi and
Sure.
special effects. All
Absolutely.
respect. I didn't see this movie, I don't think, all the way through until having seen bits and pieces of others. So like I didn't start with A New Hope. I saw bits and pieces of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi and had interest enough to be into this when I first
Hmm.
watched Alien all the way through. To start here, it is a little interesting because I know you've seen some of the prequels. I thought maybe you'd have a little more piqued interest to see kind of where cinematically it all began. But I can also understand why this would not do it for you exactly when we've kind of seen what this has inspired done better along the way. If I were to compare the horror of this guy, the xenomorph, walking around the ship, or the velociraptors in the kitchen in Jurassic Park, my gut is way more tied in knots just with those velociraptors. And this thing is clearly
Hmm.
more of a monster. I think a little bit of
Hmm.
it, in defense of the movie, is the times. I seen it was discussed or someone said somewhere, I don't know if it was Scott or someone else, the makeup, the special effects designer, something that makes the xenomorph so terrifying is you never get like a full clear shot of it to build its mystery. But now I think for us, especially in this day and age, I get a little more horror from seeing the full picture. The
Yeah.
mystery doesn't really do it for me in that way. Like
Hmm.
in your defense, that part where Dallas moves the light on his like flamethrower and sees the xenomorph, and it's just a shot of the guy in the suit putting his hands out. I find it hilarious. It's not that horrifying to me because it's just
Hmm.
surprise. Like that's what it looks like. You know, it's not as monstery. So I get where
Hmm.
you're coming from. I think the movie succeeds in what it was going for in 1979. I would
Yeah.
not consider this movie all that terrifying. That is, I honestly find the reveal of Ash as a
Yes.
robot and his head being blown up and the seizure he has before that, I find that
That
way
got my
more uncomfortable.
attention.
That's
Hmm.
freaky. Like yeah.
So, and this is one of those things where it's like hindsight's 2020, and we also have the benefit of like years of sci-fi stories on like built on top the backs of movies like this, right? But I will say I would find the movie much more sinister if like the actual like villain of the film was played up as the corporation quite a bit more. Because like if
Mhm.
you're looking into the nitty-gritty and you're really thinking about it, that is the antagonist of this film. Not only did they plant a mole, a whole android in the crew without really telling anybody about it to make sure that they went and picked up the specimen. They pick up a specimen they know is going to be dangerous. They, according to the theories of the characters, this is supposed to be like a weapon thing. They're trying to engineer a weapon based off this species. I'm not super up and up on all of the world building on this, so I might be getting some things wrong. But basically, the corporation wants a weapon. That's why they sent them to here. And they didn't tell anybody about it except for the android, which nobody even knows is an android on the ship. He's supposed to be their medical officer. So, like, there is a whole bunch there that's very sinister, especially with an AI on the ship called Mother that only some people have access to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a lot of really good potential in sinister and like suspense there that I feel like kind of goes wasted in this film.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they lean really heavy on the fact that there's this unkillable alien in the ship, and then it like to me it just falls really hard into a lot of tropes. Like Ripley even says multiple times, "Don't go off alone," and then like 5 minutes later, she's like, "You go do that thing."
Mm-hmm.
She sends one person off to go do a thing. The only thing that I found interesting thematically with her character is that she's more often than not the voice that should have been listened to in the room and is
Mm-hmm.
actively not. Like every time she tells somebody like, "Hey, this is a bad idea. We shouldn't do this. Let's follow quarantine protocol. We should do this." And somebody says, "No, I'm not going to do that," or "That's a dumb idea," or just goes ahead and violates the order that she gave them, right? And every single time she directly says, "This is what we need to do," or "This is what we need to not do," and somebody goes against her, leads to a worsening in the plot for all the characters. So
Mm-hmm.
I see that thing, and I do find that interesting. I just it wasn't again, I wasn't like heavily invested. Um
I can understand that a little bit too because I see. I was thinking to the film's credit, they don't make clear who the protagonist is. But again, I think that's
mm,
coming from a hindsight 2020 perspective. I think going into
mm,
this with fresh eyes, I've forgotten what I exactly thought the first time I watched this movie. Going into it not necessarily knowing who to rally behind just yet, I could see that being annoying. So I don't know. This might be one.
oh,
Oh, just go
I
ahead.
feel like they make it really obvious who you're supposed to cheer for.
I don't see. I don't like watching this and trying to pay attention. There's a couple of instances where there's emphasis on Ripley, but I feel like there's
Mhm,
also emphasis on our two like below deck guys and Dallas, and a
mhm,
lot on Ash. I think there's a
mhm.
way to frame this. You could, if you change the third act or whatever, that Ash is the guy there doing the good stuff, and he's with this crew of pirates or whatever. Like just because we don't know, I'm just saying, like we don't know what anyone's
Oh, oh,
motivation is
that
just yet.
completely undermines the idea of the
Yeah, I
corporation.
know. I'm just saying, like
Okay.
the emphasis that they put on Ash being there, like compared to
Mhm.
the emphasis they put on Ripley and others, like you don't know just yet who the eyes of this movie are gonna be. You get to a point where it's all of them, and I think that was in an attempt to make you care more about when everyone dies. I don't really care when
Mhm.
anyone dies. I don't think they build up anyone enough,
Yeah.
except for
Yeah.
Ripley, in the end, which of course
And
she doesn't. So that
a
feels
little
like a
bit
bit of a
Lambert,
triumph.
she's just so, like, sad-eyes the most of the
Yeah,
time,
we
and
don't
I
even
was
get to see
like,
her
I feel
die
bad
though.
for her.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, but she does, and
she
you kinda
does.
go, "That's sad."
It is.
And I think they also pretty heavily imply that, like, Ripley and Dallas were a thing, maybe not, like, officially, but they do a lot of trying to save each other
Mhm.
and not quite saying anything, but giving each other looks that seem a
Mhm.
little,
I think they
you
do
know, and
well with making all the characters feel like they know each other and that they've worked
Mhm,
together, and that I mean everything feels real. Like I do like that. I appreciate that. I think that was successful. Like with the long uncut scenes and the conversations, and there's a lot of talk about work and whether or not they get a full share, and like it doesn't feel unnecessary. It just feels like it makes the world feel believable. But
sure.
again, it kind of hurts in a way. None of these characters are interesting enough that I'm overly upset when they die.
Well, and I actually one of the first things because they throw up that card about it being like a space semi,
Hmm.
and my immediate thought was, "Oh, so we aren't getting your typical sci-fi characters. We're not getting your mad scientists or
Yeah,
your
I do
explorers.
like
We're
that.
getting just like an average work crew in
Yeah,
space."
blue
And I was like,
collar
"That's kind of an
astronauts.
interesting choice." Like, I really I think that's kind of cool, and I like how everyone just sort of like, they're very casual, like got their feet up on their consoles. There's clearly a very like workman's atmosphere on the ship. I like that. Um, I I do feel like the rhythm of the film is just funky. I think you could keep the characters the way they are for the most part and just making some different editing or directing choices, you can make us invest in them quite a bit more. One of the first things, in my opinion, is cleaning up the dialogue.
Mm.
It's really hard to understand some of these actors. And I think they were encouraged and maybe even pushed to speak like they would normally, trying to get away from your classic enunciate for the film, maybe unbelievable level of character.
Mm.
But because they're moving so casually and so quickly through a lot of things, like I had to go back and replay certain things, even with the subtitles on, just to make sure that I was following what was happening. If I was watching this in a movie theater, a lot of the relationships or even like character development elements would have gone straight over my head because I wouldn't have been able to keep up with what they were saying to each other.
I feel that. I
Um,
think I had to watch this movie about 3 times before I realized everything that was going on because
yeah,
partially that.
yeah, and like I don't know. I think what's getting me worked up at this particular point is I don't think it would have been that hard for us to emotionally connect even on a basic level with the characters. But they seem to go out of their way to almost make some of them unlikable.
Hmm.
In my opinion, Parker is not super likable. You kind of feel bad for him by the end because you've seen him go through enough to sort of sympathize with the fact that he's
Yeah, yeah.
losing his sort of brashness. But at the beginning, he's like interrupting people asking about his cut of the money like 2 or 3 times in a relatively short scene. So, like, yes, we've established his character very well, but does the audience care about him? And why does the audience get to keep the character they care the least about for the
Hmm.
longest portion of the film? So well, not the longest portion, obviously. He's not the sole survivor, but he's one of the last three.
Hmm.
And I don't know. There were a lot of choices made in this that I found to be odd or ineffective, and I don't think it's the premise. I don't think it's even necessarily the characterization. I think it's all in the directing and the editing. Things are just not made well for storytelling.
Interesting. We are not yet a full year into our little project here, and I spent time trying to correct James Cameron, and you're now taking time to correct Ridley Scott. So, I mean, we
All
clearly
right.
know what we're talking about. We're doing great. We're doing great. I mean, but I kind of get
Yeah.
it. I get it. I
I
think.
can't defend myself. This is just my opinion here.
Nah, but I understand, and like some of the things you're saying, I think that they improve upon in the next one because the next one is regarded as the
Okay.
best one. So it'll be fun to
Okay.
talk and compare those notes.
Mhm.
If we were to take a moment to acknowledge some positives, real quick, just to balance
Absolutely.
where we're at. Um, I think the set is amazing. The internal
Pretty
design of the
cool.
ship is incredible. I really
I
really
really like that some spaces are bright and warm and others are
yes.
very cold and dark and mechanical. I
Yes,
like that.
all of it I think looks amazing. A very unique aesthetic that you could take a look at it. And you immediately know what world we're in. My
Mhm.
only thing is I never know where we are if we're not on the mess hall,
In
the
the ship.
med bay,
Mm.
or in the on the bridge. It's I just don't know. I have no idea where we are, and that's not always a bad thing, except for like kind of maybe what you were saying before with the tension when there are scenes of the alien running around and we're trying to avoid it. I don't have even a rough idea of where we can go, where we can't
Mhm.
go, what level we're on. Like the Nostromo is either the biggest fucking ship ever. I mean, I
For a
know it's
crew of
not. It's huge,
7?
right? But I can't see. That's the thing, though. I can't tell how much of that is trailer and how much of that is ship, because the
Mhm.
ship that kind of moves around is a different ship that plugs into
Mhm.
the bigger ship that might plug into the trailer because they're hauling what 20 billion, 20 million, 20 whatever tons of raw mineral ore or something.
Yeah.
But I don't know how many decks we've got. I don't know, is there like it's yeah, it's just something that I think a movie like this could have taken a little bit of time to, I don't know, throw up a map. Like, I mean, we see the
Mm-hmm.
radar thing that Ash develops, but that doesn't tell us where in the ship it is. It just tells us where on the screen it is in relation to us. Again, something I think the second one does a little bit better with laying out the geography of where we are, where we can go, where we can't go.
Well,
Again,
and
that's for
I
next week.
actually in this film, I feel like they kind of missed an opportunity. They spend a lot of time in the beginning of the film establishing tone and setting by just slowly panning through some of the corridors of the ship. And I
Mm-hmm.
actually wrote down, I was like, hey, maybe we're getting a small view of important locations for later. But because they never really lock down what hallway goes where,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know where anyone is headed most of the time.
Right.
And like especially when she's trying to get to the shuttle and her path is blocked by the alien, um when she first like ran away from him and started very intentionally going a certain direction, I thought she had a secondary route.
Right. Because why
No,
wouldn't
she was
she?
just running away.
Right. She had to go turn off
Yeah.
the auto destruct. Like, yeah, there's a couple of things that could be assisted by there being more of a layout explained. But again,
Hmm.
this is one of the first of its kind, so it wouldn't have been something that
Hmm.
maybe would have been thought about right away.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I am going to be the one in this duo this time around that's going to give the movie more slack, just because I appreciate what it did and where it comes from, but I can't necessarily disagree with what you're saying.
Well, and I gotta say, like, I'm trying to do that as well, but without the knowledge or benefit of what really comes as a result, right? I have seen the prequels weirdly. I accidentally watched them. I did not realize they were alien movies at first. I'm sorry, guys.
Hmm.
But they like there's like you're saying the second one is widely regarded as the best film, and this one probably does kind of like you were talking about the Terminators. It sets up the world and the environment pretty well, so that when you actually revisit it, it's really good. And I'm actually beginning to wonder if maybe the secret to a good sequel is a very interesting but kind of poorly written first film, because then you get to take the really cool ideas from the
Uh-huh.
first film and actually write a good story on
Maybe
it.
it worked for the 80s.
Yeah. Um so
I
I'm still interested and invested in the series, and I definitely want to know more about like the corporation angle of things. I get the sense they do more with that based off the prequel
they
stuff.
they do
So
and they
I want
don't.
to know.
So I don't want to spoil anything, so I won't.
Well, don't. Yeah.
But the corporation's motivation in this movie, I'm not sure if it makes any sense. If
Mm.
you watch this movie in a vacuum, it does. It's fine. You can
Okay.
assume the
Okay.
corporation knows of the xenomorph, figured out maybe where one was, and they want it or whatever. However, the other 7 movies that exist, as far as I know, and there's lots of comics and books and there's a video game, so like I don't know everything. I won't pretend to know everything. And you've seen the 2 prequels. They
Hmm.
don't explain why the corporation would know about the xenomorph right now, because Prometheus ends with everyone dying and them going to the alien planet, and Covenant ends with everyone dying. So the corporation, as of Alien, we don't have any explicit info given to them to know about the xenomorph, to know about the space jockey there, to know about anything, because that space jockey isn't one we see in Prometheus or one we see in Covenant. So that's just another one. Like,
Interesting.
why? Like, I mean, why? I could talk
Yeah,
about
that's
this
fair.
because you've seen
That's
those
fair.
movies. It's
Hmm.
completely inexplicable in this, at least in this context, from the context of these movies. The next
I mean, I
movies,
think you could still kind of like I mean, I'm sure there is context that makes this harder to do, but currently, I'm kind of thinking you can just kind of wave a wand and be like, the company or the corporation vaguely knows about the existence of xenomorphs and has been looking for them and maybe has calculated the odds of them being on this planet is pretty high, and so they're shooting their shot, so to speak.
I
But
mean,
I
maybe.
don't know. I know less than you do, so I should probably stop guessing.
Well, and I don't know that much. It's just
Mhm.
the The only xenomorph that technically we almost see before this, as of right now, is the protomorph that David makes at the end of
Mhm.
Covenant. And the only
Yeah.
one who really dealt with that was whatever her name was, and it died, from what I recall. And then she goes into hypersleep. There's supposed to be a third movie, though, to Covenant that
Oh.
isn't Romulus.
Never got made.
Well, I don't know. I think they're still working on it. So there could be eventually
You could
context
patch it up.
added to why the
Mhm.
corporation knows. But in the last 40 years, we've not received it. Um,
Mm.
the in chronological order, this is not a spoiler. This was in the trailers. The next movie is Alien Romulus, which does make the
Um,
motivations of the corporation in Aliens make a lot more sense. Now, it already made sense to begin with, but it ends up making even more sense. So that one is fine. And
Props to Romulus.
Romulus is cool. We'll get to it eventually in like 2 months. Um, but it's just as of now, where we are now in the world, in the timeline, there is nothing explicit for them to know at all about the xenomorph, to send them on this mission, to send Ash to go get them, because Ash clearly knows what it is. He knows
Yeah.
plenty. He knows what to like. He's
It's very interesting because his character motivations weren't totally making sense to me in the first part of the film.
mhm,
I had no idea. Like this was the amount of things I didn't know was actually pretty high going into this. Surprisingly, for it being such an old film, such a classic in like a genre that I really like. Um, Probably because of the sort of like horror like element of
mhm,
it. But
mhm.
like I went in knowing that Ripley's the only survivor. And that there's an alien that kills everybody. I did not realize like I didn't even know Mother was a thing going into it. Finding out that Ash was an android was surprising. Um that's like I said, that was one of the few things in the film where I kind of like sat up and went, "Oh, this is interesting. What's going on here?
That's
I did not know that."
that's good because a year ago I spoiled 3 of the androids for you, so I'm really glad you forgot.
I totally forgot.
Good, because I didn't know you hadn't seen some
um,
of them, and I spoiled it
mhm.
immediately.
I mean, like that explained a lot for me, and I really like stories that give you pieces that you just can't make sense of until a certain reveal moment later in the story.
Mhm.
This movie did that pretty well. They did not use it to the best of their advantage, in my opinion, but they did have that element where you like they were woken up early and they didn't know that was going to happen, but it was kind of a planned stop, right? They're off course. Things are
Right.
weird. You don't know what's going on. Um, and then the scientist kind of like insisting on breaking protocols and everything. I'm like, this is the medical officer, and he's just going to go around being the mad scientist. That's a strong character choice, I guess.
Mhm.
And he also was kind of like weirdly defensive about really looking into the microscope and just like a couple of different things. And I was like, this is not kind of coming together. And then I found out that he like it revealed that Mother had a directive only for the head science officer or whatever it was. And we never actually totally get to know what that is, I don't think. We
It's
do
just to
get a
recover
little
the
bit.
alien, and the crew is expendable.
Yeah,
That's all it is.
yeah, that's all it is. Um, and then it's clear that he's a bad guy from the beginning. He's in on things, but I did not expect him to be not a person. So that was cool. I liked that stuff, and it all like started to make sense. Like even his lack of empathy, he's literally not human, and it's a really good stand-in for the corporation, which would consider all of its workers' lives expendable in the pursuit of profit through weapons.
Hmm.
Like that's solid, but it just is so underused in the film. They give you all the pieces to put the picture together, but by putting the picture together, you get nothing.
Hmm.
Like you just get that she's on her own. That's
Hmm.
that's all that you really get. And I don't know, I mean, consider she goes to start the auto destruct button, but Mother won't do it because the alien species is on board. Like that's a way to get her involved because like Mother is the AI that works for the corporation and the corporation's main goal is to bring the species back. All crew is
Oh,
expendable.
right.
So the ship won't blow up with the alien on it because they want to bring it back at all costs to the corporation. But I don't think it's sort of suggested that Mother doesn't have control over those systems, but then Ripley like curses at her when it doesn't stop, when she just barely misses the countdown. So like there's just parts of this film that feel like they should have been connected, but they weren't. They weren't used to their fullest potential, I don't
Mhm.
feel like. I don't know. I'm going back to what I've already talked about, so I'm going to stop talking. But
I
that's
don't know.
kind of
I kind of
where
get
I
it.
felt with all of that.
This is gonna be one where I'm gonna like push you to watch it once a year and see how you feel about it, especially after watching all of them in the context.
Okay,
It'll be
I'd
interesting.
watch it again.
Yeah, that's good at least, I
Mhm.
think. Yeah. See, I think this one is really fun to talk about in tandem with the second, which is unfortunate because we're not there
Okay.
yet. Um, in general, how do you feel about the aliens' design?
I really like it. With maybe the exception of the weird mouth thing,
Hmm.
that like proboscis metal teeth piece.
Hmm.
That's the only part that seems very strange. The rest of it feels pretty organic and natural. Even the extreme like head thing, that's a fun design choice, like just a massive, massive head.
Hmm.
Although that is indicative of maybe a really big brain, which would suggest intelligence, and I don't think they're ever supposed to be intelligent.
They are like one step above like basic animal intelligence. We get one
Yeah.
specific instance in multiple movies, but one specific instance of intelligence beyond what you'd expect from a regular animal.
Okay. Um, I thought that was cool. I also really liked the design of just like the species that they last destroyed. I don't know what they called it, but like the big dead skeleton on the big gun,
The
like that
space
was
jockey, that's
cool.
just a suit for one of the engineers.
Still, like it looks like ribs and
Yeah,
it's
true.
cool. I feel like I want more of that. I don't
Hmm.
know that we'll ever get it because it's clearly just like sort of like a origin place for
Right.
where they encounter it first. But the idea of like climbing around a massive ship designed for
Hmm.
species that are like 10 times larger than you, that's
Right.
really cool.
Did you
Um
catch that was the engineer? One of the engineers? That's the
not
same.
oh of the species
Yeah, of Prometheus.
engineer
That's
of the
that's one of the
species.
same ships that we explore in Prometheus. That's why
Yeah,
Prometheus
no,
was so fun.
I remember seeing that platform.
Yeah.
Um, I do not remember the specific character that it
Just the
is,
big
but
10-foot guys. Like that's one of them. That's one of them.
right.
Yeah.
But like it's been a year,
Fair.
and I didn't put a ton of effort into watching them. I just
Okay.
thought, here's an
Okay.
interesting movie.
Oh, okay, fine.
So again, I had no idea that I was accidentally diving into one of the most iconic franchises. I just thought,
All
here's a
right.
fun space
Here's a
movie.
fun space romp. I won't spend any time worrying about it because I was gonna ask you, since you've already seen Prometheus, like
Mhm.
there is more to like speculate on with this
Yeah.
situation because for one, something had to plant the eggs. They aren't just
Mhm.
designed like that. And in Prometheus, we see the creature that comes out of the engineer after it was implanted with the giant monster facehugger. That kind of xenomorph is referred to as a deacon. The thing that burst out of the space jockey in Alien, there should be a deacon running around this planet somewhere. But of course, that didn't exist yet. But like in the full context, in the big picture here, where are all the xenomorphs? Where's the
Mhm.
deacon? What? How
Mhm.
long has this been here? Like, there are more fun questions to be
Yeah.
asked.
It definitely and I do like that it doesn't try to answer all the questions. I think a lot of films sort of fall into this trap of like because I have a cool world building element, I have to fully explain it. So they will
Mhm.
magically find some parchment that tells the exact history of the xenomorphs. I don't really want that.
Oh,
Um,
oh,
that would
but
not have worked for this film at all. Not this film.
no,
Um,
not this film. See, this film is we're 5 weeks ahead right now for a second, all right? Because you said too many magic words. This film is asking the questions. Therefore, it
yes.
does not need to answer them right away. It's setting the scene.
Hmm. Hmm.
40 years later, here comes Prometheus, a potential answer to the questions. You know how many questions it answered? None. Not one. It didn't answer any of them. It just asked like 80 more. And then Covenant comes along. Did it answer any of the questions?
Not really.
Technically, maybe one or
Some
two.
of them.
But like as a whole,
Hmm.
no. It just didn't. Like, it was so. Never mind. I'm back. I'm back in present day. I'm back in present day.
But like for this film, I liked the choice to be like, we're not really going to explore this massive alien ship because one of our members goes down, and we're
Yes,
not
yes.
explorers. We're just getting out.
Right.
And obviously that kind of aligns with everybody's motivations, even the ones you don't know at that point. So it works out. They all leave, and that gets them isolated on the ship with the one enemy, which is slowly taking everybody out. Which I gotta say, the lack of bodies really worked against this film. It was rated R. I don't know what it was trying to like not do, but like
They said fuck a lot, and we saw Sigourney Weaver's butt for a second.
yeah,
So
that was
I
annoying.
guess
But
that's why. Because
like
it is funny to watch this movie nowadays and be like, there's more blood in a superhero movie, a basic superhero movie these
yeah.
days, man. Like this really isn't that bad.
I mean, I'm not questioning the rating because there are reasons for the rating, but it's just that in an R-rated horror film, I wouldn't expect you to be like, we can't show any gore.
Right.
So, it's the closest we get to bodies is we kind of see, I think, Parker over
And
on the
Lambert,
corner
but
and
like
like the
that's
legs of
it.
Lambert, and that's it.
That's
And
it. Well, we do see the face
mostly it just
hugger burst out of Kane's chest.
this is true.
That's
We do see that
that's
blood
pretty.
gets
I
on
mean,
people's faces.
even these days,
Yeah.
that's pretty
Hmm.
up there. They probably had to pick and choose. The censors of that day had to be like, all right, you get to
Maybe.
pick. You get 5 corpses or one burst
Hmm.
open chest on a guy that is technically at the
And it's
time still
iconic, so
alive.
they obviously made the right
Yeah, they made the right
choice.
choice. They made the right choice. We have to remember there was the chest burster, so that's
It's
pretty damn
just
good.
like, I guess again, lacking any real personal or emotional connection to these characters. At the very least, I would have been dismayed and horrified by mangled corpses.
Hmm.
And I'm not even a gore person. Like, I don't usually argue for films to have more gore, but I was like, give me a reason to care that these people are dying. They're just
Yes, yes.
disappearing on a massive spaceship. They could just be around the corner off comms.
Hmm.
Like,
That's a good point. That's a good point. That's Cabin in the Woods right there. That's exactly what happened. Um, yeah, I don't know. This will be interesting in context as well because I don't remember. Well, I mean, I know what the xenomorphs use people for, and we'll see more of that later. However, that's not happening in this movie. And they kind of, I
Mhm.
can't recall if they eat humans or not because they're kind of like, if Lambert and Parker are indications of what happened to Dallas and whatever his name is, they're just left there. They're just hanging around. They're kind of
Yeah.
like the Dark Angels with Quiet Place. Like they don't eat them. They're just killing
Mhm.
people. So, and with what we learned from Prometheus and Covenant, that kind of makes sense. If they're like a bioengineered weapon species, they wouldn't think about food right away. However,
Right.
the following movies do help to indicate more and more that they're still animals, and there is
Mhm.
still a natural element to them. So again, looking at this movie in a vacuum, you don't have to explore that. I wouldn't have been upset though if they did. Kind of
Like,
situation.
and I'm not even necessarily speaking that it would be good to have a motivation for the alien. It is enough that it is a sinister thing that's hard to kill, that is killing,
But the
right?
motivation
But
adds to the horror, or the lack of takes away from the horror, like I
well,
think you were saying.
yes, but I'm honestly not even thinking like, I'm not even thinking that intellectually about this part of it. I'm just saying I couldn't care that these people are dying, and
Mhm.
one way to get me to care would be seeing horribly killed human beings.
Mhm.
And they didn't even do that, which is like a basic in the horror genre.
Mhm.
So, I don't know. I'm having a hard time with some of the choices this film made. I'm like, I mean, it's the belly bursting thing is terrible.
Mhm.
It's very dramatic. It's iconic. It horrifying from the sense of just like this dude is just eating and now
Mhm.
he is dying.
Yeah.
But
I
it it, it,
the
that's the only thing
yeah.
that I mean. Honestly, the face hugger
I was gonna
is
say,
scarier.
I think the facehugger is one of the worst things that sci-fi has ever
Yeah.
created, ever. And I understand the metaphor for it. I absolutely do. To be invaded and to have
Hmm.
something put in your body against your will.
Hmm.
I would bet so many people miss the metaphor
Yeah.
there.
Hmm.
I got it. I got it, and it does. It's a
And the fact
very
that our main character happens to be a woman. I know they
yes.
talk about casting regardless of gender, but like it connects
It
because they
does.
did
It
cast a
does.
woman.
It does. It does. Absolutely. Um, and it definitely puts a lot in perspective. Um, and it's horrible. And the facehuggers are easily, I think, the creepiest thing
Yeah.
from this whole fucking franchise. And we see in one of the movies them remove a facehugger in all its glory. Like
Ugh.
we see in scans how far down into the person the facehugger goes. We do not see until this particular movie all of it coming out. And it
Ugh.
is uncomfortable to say the least. It is awful. The facehugger is terrible. I hate the facehugger. But like brilliant horror, brilliant alien
Mhm.
design all
Mhm.
around. Ugh, God, awful. It is weird to think of it as an animal. The fact that that's technically a
Bipedal and everything.
xenomorph, like kind of, somewhat, maybe not really,
Mm.
somewhat, sorta, not really, kind of. It's weird. It's a weird thing.
Oh, you mean the face hugger,
Yeah, like it's
typically.
technically the
Okay.
first stage of life for
Right.
the xenomorph. It's just because like I don't think it's wrong to think of them as like two completely separate entities, but like they're not at the same
I
time.
mean, I think it's more analogous to, like, caterpillar, butterfly. Looking at them, you wouldn't
Yeah,
think they're
yeah,
connected, but clearly, like, one comes from the other,
very much
so
so. There will be some more questions worth exploring and asking as we get into the next one specifically, again, as to how any of this came to be. So that'll be fun. Um, but yeah, xenomorphs, face huggers, grossness, awful, just awful, disgusting, terrible.
yeah.
Ugh.
And yet it's over in maybe even the first act of the film, and they never go back to it.
Well, yeah, it's because in the '80s they had built up to the monster and everyone was scared.
I just again, surely I do not know better than awarded directors. And yet, and I think I'm really, really getting the benefit of years of building on this film and this genre and hindsight, right? Like creating something from scratch is always going to be a little rough. You're always going to get probably one of the lower end versions of what ultimately you end up creating when you're working from scratch.
Hmm.
But there's just so much in this film that with a couple of tweaks could be really excellent, and it continuously, in my opinion, falls short of those choices.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
and I mean, you see it in a lot of the pieces that independently don't seem like a big deal, but when you put all of those misses together, the whole film just sort of feels like it's incomplete somehow. I mean,
I
I'm
mean,
not emotionally attached or even really caring that people are dying on this
mhm.
ship. I should care that aliens are killing people. Anyway, one alien is killing people, right? I feel like the I really feel like the sound hurts this film quite a bit.
Mm.
I think some of the sound choices are cool. I really like the sort of like creaking, like clicking sounds that we hear in the opening credits. But the moment we switch to a mechanical ship, those sounds stop. So it's almost like it's indicating that sound is space, or even like maybe the message that's in space.
Interesting.
But like I associate those sounds with the creaking part of a ship or engines, right? And it's weird to me that a very a very easy way to ground your story in the blue collars astronauts like vibe is to be like the ship creaks and turns and boils. You could even use that in your horror because there's something down the end of the hallway, or is it just like the boiler, right? Like, there's so much you can do to ground your world in audio and to heighten emotional moments. And the heartbeat and the breathing, it's cool, but it does not carry the film. Everything else just seems neglected. And I do kind of understand the argument that like having no soundtrack makes it feel more grounded. But I would argue the long shots like that don't cut, just long no cut shots with no music and little to no sound when I don't care emotionally about the characters, it doesn't work for your film. I'm sorry. It doesn't work.
I can understand, but damn, we're really coming for Mr. Scott here. Just
I'm
laying it all out.
sorry. I don't even think like the costumes are cool, the set is cool, the monster design is awesome. I like most of the performances, even if I feel like they could have enunciated better. Most of the actors are very clear about who their characters are and they portray that accurately. Um, there's a lot to like, but I feel like it's a real weakness. The audio is a real weakness in the film.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Mm.
I think this is a good place to stop. This is a little shorter than some of our other ones, but like there's going to be more to discuss as we get further into this franchise. And I think where we're at, I do think there might be more to say just about the difference in our horror tolerance level. We kind of touched on it a couple of times and came back to it again with the face hugger. I do think there is a different, perhaps, threshold or just a completely different kind of horror in that being chased around anything by a thing that's going to kill you, I don't think that's really going to faze a lot of people anymore. Like, worst case, I die. But the face hugger, it violates you. And, like, I would rather be attacked and destroyed by a werewolf than bit by a zombie and then live and have to deal with the fact that I'm losing myself to it, that I will become the thing. And so, like you said,
you picked a weird example because werewolf is the original version of that.
That's true. That's true. I guess I was just thinking of the thing that like rips you apart. But that's a good point. The Velociraptor then. Well, that's the thing though. With the werewolf, you survive. The other ones, they still end you. You lose yourself and then you also die. But because you said it was so good, but it was over so quickly. It's an interesting approach to it. And I think that Covenant kind of plays with that a lot, with how easy it is to get infected all over that world. I was like always very spooked. But we'll take a look at that again in the future. Next week is Aliens, which is, like I said, really, really good. So it'll be fun. You'll probably hate it. But as of now, for me at least, tis still a whale. 'Tis a whale.
Sure.
Sure.
I don't know that I'm fully at whale status. I think it's close. And maybe it should be a whale simply out of respect for what it like started and what it is. Maybe I'll revisit this rating after I've seen the rest of the franchise. I'd be okay with that. I don't know that it is a whale for me.
Oh, all right. If people listen to this, you'd get a lot of hate for that.
They're not going to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, no one will ever hear this.
Even if they do, like, that's my opinion, my dudes. I'm sorry. Again, I might not be the audience for this film. I'm not super into horror stories. I often don't really get them in the sense of like how people are truly like entertained by it. Like some people genuinely enjoy like being scared. I definitely have like an interest in adrenaline rush. I like to do things that kind of get me like in that fight or flight mode a little bit. Like you could think about like high ropes courses or something.
Mhm.
But like horror films and things that are like classically designed to spook you don't do that for me. If I'm going to enjoy a monster film, it's because it has something to say about society.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry. And it's not because I'm trying to be like elitist. It's just for some reason that is the only way that I connect with those tales. I don't like the heebie-jeebie spooky creepiness. I'm just kind of like, I mean, it's scary. So
But whatever. Okay, fine. Some of us saw Woman in Black in theaters and were scarred for life, okay? Some of us saw I Am Legend and couldn't sleep for a month, okay?
I actually did have nightmares from I Am
There we
Legend.
go. There we go.
But
That's what we're going to end on.
even
I Am Legend is a true horror movie. It's good stuff. It's awful. It's terrifying. But yeah, next week we're doing Aliens. No more of this slander from you. You've had your say.
sorry.
You've had your say.
I'm
All
only a
right.
little sorry.
Uh-huh. All right. We're done.